them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. Oh, them loot Zimbabwe dry. Them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. Oh, how the people die. Them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. No medication in hospitals. Them loot, them loot, them loot. Schools have no books. Them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. The ghetto youth have no jobs. Them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. Lord of mercy. Them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. Oh, them loot Zimbabwe dry. Lord of mercy. Jah have mercy. Them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot, them loot. Oh, while the people die, while the people cry. Vanoba, zvipatara zvisina mushonga vachiba. Vanoba, zvikoro zvisina mabhuku vanoba, vechidiki vachishaya mabasa vanoba. Kana mvura hakuna vanoba. Lord of mercy.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Zimbabwe Daily. This is Behind the Microphone, a program that takes a look at all the issues making the headlines and going a little bit deeper. Just last week, we had quite a very long letter from the ZCTU President, Comrade Peter Mutasa, where he was writing to the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Now, we want to just go into that letter and find out what was going on in Comrade Peter's head when he penned that letter to the presidency. And did that letter get to the intended person, or it just aroused interest in the minds of the people? Welcome, Comrade Mutasa. Welcome to Zimbabwe Daily.
Thank you. It's once again my pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. We want to take a look at the letter that you wrote to the president. You called it an open letter to the presidency. Do you think that letter got to him?
Right. Firstly, the idea behind open letters is multifaceted. Firstly, is you may be making a call to the public to judge between the two of you, the writer and the recipient. In this case, the working class and the government of Zimbabwe, as represented by President Emmerson Mnangagwa. So in that regard, I think the citizens are speaking about it. They are making judgments. That other reason also is to call for wider
all right. The challenges of technology, sometimes we get to miss you. We're missing you there, Mr. President. We can't hear you. We can't even get you. All right, just as we try to... Yes, you're back. We can hear you. And you're frozen. All right, just as we try to get him back on, we just want to take a look at the letter that he wrote to the president. It's an open letter to President Emmerson Mnangagwa from Peter Gift Mutasa, the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions president. No, Mr. President, this is not working. Zimbabwe is now a failed state. Mr. President, I address you on behalf of workers of Zimbabwe who are suffering and disillusioned. I also address you in my own capacity as a citizen desiring better life for my family. We engage you openly because in many ways your government has closed all avenues of proper and effective participation of labor and other civic society movements in governance. Your government has also designated the labor movement, especially the ZCTU, a terrorist organization, thereby closing most avenues of genuine dialogue. We also address you openly because this is a matter of public interest. Many would like to tell you what we're telling you, but are gripped in fear. When you came back from exile and took over leadership of this country, you promised that you will be approachable, a listening president, as soft as wool and tolerant to divergent views. You promised us democracy, freedom, prosperity, respect for dignity, and fairness. You said you were ushering us into a new dispensation different from the Mugabe dispensation, which you were also ironically part of. Your new dispensation was supposed to be based on constitutionalism, rule of law, national cohesion, democracy, and zero tolerance to corruption, just to mention just a few of the many things you promised to do differently. It is important to point out that workers and many citizens participated in the processes that led to inauguration as the second executive president of Zimbabwe in November 2019. We keep on trying to get hold of President Mutasa. President Mutasa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Awesome. Welcome back. We're just reading the contents of the letter to some of our viewers who may not have managed to do that. So please go ahead. You were saying that the idea of open letters is also to get the citizens to understand the issues that are happening in our society. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, so in that regard, I think it has achieved what we intended it to achieve. Workers are commenting about it and they are alive to the issues. Citizens are getting in touch with us. Media is getting in touch with us. They are raising the issues. Some are raising questions, and we are responding. And there is one particular objective that we intend, and that is action must be taken. That some form of action must be taken. But we also think that it arrived and reached the president because we have been having some contacts from the president's offices, the people we believe to be secret services, and some of them not pleasant threats, and some of them are pleasant, seeking to understand our psyche and our reasoning. And we also have received some, even within unions, those who are linked to the government raising their concerns. And we have been responding and advising them that this is the position of workers. All over, workers are not happy. The system is not working for anyone.
Right. Right. And I want to go right into the letter. The first portion, well, it was just giving context. But when you mentioned that it's not working, and you spoke about the security of persons, can we go into that? Because we've seen indeed in increasing numbers of abductions, and all the issues that you raised. Maybe let's get into that.
So the basis of the letter is to alert the president, the government, and citizens that nothing is working. Things are not working in this country. And also to alert them that we were complaining during Mugabe's regime. Regime was
Zimbabwe is now a failed state. The state failure is shown in a number of ways. Number one, a state failing to provide and guarantee security of persons. Many people, including trade union activists, now live in fear. What the late Liberation War national hero Dr. E.M. Jobbo didn't expect is unfortunately happening. He said this about the state the revolutionaries intended to build. We do not want to create a social legal order in the country in which people are petrified, in which people go to bed having barricaded their doors and their windows because someone belonging to the special branch of the police will break into their houses. This is what we've been fighting against. This is why we are in this revolution for as long as it is necessary to abolish the system. The abductions, torture, and surveillance of civic society, journalists, and opposition activists is scary and deplorable. We never expected this to happen in an independent state. Many of us believe that this is being done by state agents. I was almost abducted not once and have had many threats targeting at my family and my person. My 19-year-old nephew was abducted and tortured in January 2019. President, welcome back. Please take us through this state failing to provide and guarantee security of persons.
Right, sorry, the network appears to be very poor, but I was pointing out that basically the state is failing to provide public or political goods, positive political goods to citizens. And one of the most important role of the state is to provide human security. Unfortunately, we are witnessing things that at times we didn't witness even during Mugabe's era, where citizens are now afraid. We can't even sleep at home well. Just today, I was reading a tweet from Obed Masaraure, where he was pointing out that they stayed in the bush for some time in 2020, last year. We had terrible instances ever since the so-called new dispensation came into power. For the first time, we saw citizens being shot and killed in the streets of Harare on 1 August. We saw terrible things in January 2019 when citizens were brutalized by the security services. Even the Commission of Inquiry has failed to remedy these things. These things are continuing, and now with COVID-19, we've seen weaponization of COVID-19, where citizens cannot even air their views, where citizens are not even free to speak. So we are pointing out to the government that the role of the state is to provide security for everyone, and not just those in power, and not just those in the political elite or the rich, but everyone has to feel that they are secure. And this is not just out of our own making. When they were coming from the Liberation War, when they were fighting in the Liberation War, I made a quotation there from a revered national liberation, national hero, the late Comrade Edson Zobo, where he was very clear that in the post-independent state, people should not be petrified. They should not sleep barricading their homes, fearing state security. Unfortunately, this is what we are witnessing. If the threat was coming out of other groups, not the state, it was not going to be state failure. But where the state becomes and acts like a militia, and where the state security acts like rebels, then clearly that is state failure, and that is what we're conveying to the president.
It is quite unfortunate that we have this generation saying the same things that our forefathers used to say to the colonial regime that was in charge. And you continued with your letter and you spoke about the economic and social implosion. Can you give us an update on what this means to the worker in Zimbabwe? Are we characterized, or can we be said we are workers, or maybe rather than slaves?
So everyone who is in employment, in formal employment and informal employment, and not just those who are working for others, but including those who are working for themselves in subsistence farming, for example, or in small-scale farming, for example, tobacco farmers, coconut farmers, maize farmers. All people in this country are working for nothing. And I think graphically, it was put graphically well by a former ZANU-PF MP, Kilaziv, yesterday. I was reading his tweet where he was saying, in Rhodesia, people were complaining about oppression, about repression, about discrimination. but at least if the economy was serving some people, especially the working class, better than now. And you are saying now, even the economy is now serving the few, and the rest are suffering. So people who are working are currently in slavery. We are in bondage. Look at it this way. The domestic workers who are working for 30 days, they are only earning 900, which is the gazetted minimum wage for the domestic workers. 900 Zimbabwean dollars is equivalent to roughly 8 to 9 US dollars. So for working for 30 days, someone is only able to buy 9 loaves of bread. That is pathetic. And these are people who are supposed to take care of their families. Look at the minimum wage. 2,549 Zimbabwean dollars is equivalent to 25 US dollars. For working for the whole month, a person who is supposed to feed a family, who is supposed to pay rent, house, school fees, and everything, they are earning only sufficient to buy 25 loaves of bread. And you then look at the cost of living. The poverty datum line for a family of 5 is over 25,000 now, 25,000 Zimbabwean dollars. So the minimum wage is now almost 9 or 8%. This is pathetic. I've been talking to people who worked in Rhodesia. They've got so many memories about how they could buy things, how they could buy cows, how they could buy clothes and send their kids to boarding schools. That is no longer there anymore. And the bad part about it, it's not because the country no longer has the riches that it had. It's only simply because the few have decided to amass all the wealth and to accumulate all the wealth at the expense of the majority working class. And this is what we're lamenting. The workers are frustrated. They are in a state of hopelessness. We are agitated. We feel we have been betrayed by the Mnangagwa regime that we marched in the streets for on 18 November 2017. It's great betrayal that we never thought would happen in an independent state.
And you voted for that same administration in 2018 and gave them a fresh mandate. Won't you say, as workers, you continue to be flogging a dead horse? You continue to say the same things on a daily basis and nothing is changing? Would you blame the young people who have decided to take it upon themselves to then say, you know what, we are going to cross the borders in search of greener pastures. We are going to do informal trading in order for us to be able to make a living. I mean, if we were to look at the coming on board of the opposition in Zimbabwe in 2000, today is 2021, a child will be getting their key this year, of independence. What needs to change? I mean, we've been saying this for as long as we can remember.
Right. So I think firstly, we need to learn from our history. The liberation of this country did not wake up and it did not start in 1979 or 1978 or 1980.
Right.
The workers started forming unions in the late 20s, 1920s were forming unions. And in the 1940s, the working class, who are really the pioneers of the liberation struggle of this country, our Benjamin Burombos, our Dr. Joshua Nkomos, they started talking about liberating this country. They started doing what we are doing today, raising the issues to authority, organizing workers, and conscientizing the class, the working class and the peasants. So we should not tire. My thesis is that we are in the struggle. Yes, it has taken time. For Zimbabwe, we've been talking about these issues for almost over 2 decades now. For the working class, we started to talk about corruption in 1986, 1987. We started fighting against neoliberalism, as known as ESAP in the early 90s. We are still continuing. What is important is not to lose heart. The struggle changes and gets into different cycles and different environments.
So we are in a particular epoch. We are in a different environment, but we are still supposed to wage on with the struggle. In the past, after the working class made noise, it realized that it cannot achieve it just at the factories. It moved to form liberation nationalist parties. ZANU-PF, ZAP, they were formed by workers. We are surprised today when they tell us that you should be focusing on bread and butter issues and not politics, when we are the ones who introduced all the nationalists into politics from our struggles at the workplace. So we want to advise everyone, including the workers, ourselves, and the youths, and those who are leaving. You still need to come back. You still have your families back. You still have your mothers and grandparents here. So you cannot ditch the struggle. Let us continue, but we must also learn from our own experiences. There are many mistakes that we made in this struggle. For example, when the workers moved to form a political party, at some point we think as workers we lost control, and that is an issue that we need to correct. We need to be also grounded on ideology. A struggle without ideology, as Lenin said, without a revolutionary theory, there's no revolutionary movement. A struggle without an ideology is wasting time. So we are still supposed to fight our battles and also adapt to the new normal, to the new changes that have come. We cannot fight again like we did in the past. We need to use the new tools, the new things that are available. And part of the struggle is these open letters. Let us talk about the issues. The first freedom that we are going to attain is freedom from fear. And this is why speaking up, this is why writing up, this is why singing like the Demlut that Hopo sang is important. So the struggle continues. Aluta continue.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us. We're coming to you live from our Zimbabwe Daily studio, so feel free to send in your contribution. Thank you so much, Shepherd Stole, for coming through. Msharuka tukukona imuripo. Joseph Baba Mfaro tinokugamchirai. Welcome to Zimbabwe Daily. Osted Diklomani, Zimbabwe has failed its people, you say. Thank you so much for your comment. Jafet Moyo, thank you so much for coming through. It is expected that gatekeepers would, as usual, try to block the information from reaching the president, but a reading and listening president would at some point come across this information. We hope indeed that the president has managed to read this information, and peradventure it will make sense to him. Thank you so much, Marvelous S. Tawomera. You say we are here, President. So, President, your fans are here. Your fellow Labour members are also here. You said the idea is to keep pointing these lapses by until they're addressed. They have to be repeatedly said a million times as long as the issues still exist. Indeed, Mr. President, I'll take you. We need to say it again. You mentioned the failure of this government to provide public services to its citizens. What are we seeing on a daily basis, especially with the coming on board of COVID-19?
So the concept of democracy is that a government must be chosen by the people. So this is why politicians always want to talk about their legitimacy as coming from the elections, were chosen by the people. But there's a second point to it. A government that is legitimate must also be a government for the people. So when we look at legitimacy, especially as workers and citizens, we are not so much fighting around the elections because there are players that are fighting around that, although it's very important for us to have free and fair elections, because that is how we can deal away with the demagogues. That is how we can deal away with dictators. But elections may not be free and fair, as we have witnessed in Africa and in Zimbabwe. But our call for any government is that when you now say you are the government, you must provide for the citizens' needs.
Right.
And that is what we term output legitimacy. Government of President Mnangagwa dismally failed. He took over the state from Robert Mugabe when bread was almost 50 cents. Now it's over $1 something, and in other cases. If you look at our education in resettlement areas, some of the schools resemble pigsties, and they are pathetic areas where we are sending our kids to. If you look at the medical care world, that closed hospitals for almost 6 months during the first wave of COVID-19 pandemic. And that is pathetic. That shows a government that has lost it completely. So if you compare that, you can see that we are generating. It is completely COVID lockdown. During the lockdown by the state, no social security. People are starving. People are hungry in the homes. Look at jobs and look at the salaries that workers are working for. We cannot argue anymore. Unless someone is not normal, Zimbabwean state has failed to provide public services.
Right. Thank you so much, Mofela David Mutwere, for coming through. You said ED got 33%, he must go. Well, the Constitutional Court thought otherwise. Hans Morin, thank you so much. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. In solidarity from the Netherlands. Thank you so much for coming through. Midzepet, you say, if I can't get you, nobody else can. I think that's a mentality that we continue to see on many of our friends in our country, where if I can get it, then nobody else should get it. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for highlighting some of these failed public services. Public service provision to the people. Now we move on to what you felt some of the causes of the state's failure. You mentioned issue of corruption, cartels, and capture of the state by the elites and their cronies. And I'm sure that that document, that expose by the Daily Maverick pointed to some of this. Maybe give us your own take on what was exposed by that expose.
I think for the working class, we have always been talking about this. We've been talking about corruption. We've been challenging the politicians. But the expose also brought some information that is quite critical for building consciousness within the working class and for us to understand what really is happening. For example, we complained bitterly and we arrested on 11 October 2018 when we were challenging Minister of Finance Mutuli Ncuve's policy of migrating worker salaries from US dollars, converting them into bond notes or the local currency RTGS. We told him that we are going to lose out, workers were going to lose out. And we lost because salaries, teachers were earning 520 US dollars. Now they are earning 50 US dollars. People were earning 1,000 US dollars. Now they are earning 70 US dollars. So we were arrested for raising those issues. But now what is coming out from that expose is that just one transaction that was paid to Sakunda caused workers, caused farmers, caused all productive sectors to lose 23% of their incomes, 23% of our pensions, 23% of our savings that were converted from US dollars to Zimbabwean dollars. And because someone was paid at a preferential rate, and because RBZ had to increase money supply, had to print more money to pay someone, a crony of those who are in the political elites, we all lost out. And this is quite critical. It shows that the country is not naturally weak. It has got all the riches that we need, the natural resources. It is simply lacking stewardship. It points out to the point that everyone has been held at ransom by the few in the political elite and their cronies in business. So this is quite fundamental. Workers everywhere have to know that their suffering is not natural. Their suffering is a result of decisions that are made by men and women in the cabinet and men and women in Politburo. The political decisions that they make is what is causing all of us to suffer. And all the other exposés that were made in there, like in fuel, the end result is wealth is going to be transferred from the poor, from the workers, from the farmers. Tobacco farmers are going to be selling their tobacco. They're only going to be paid 50% in US dollars. The other 50% is going to be given to the cronies who are going to sell it at the black market after getting it at 83 and immediately get 40%. That is an unfair society which transfers wealth from the poor to the rich.
Right, right. An unfair society, you call it, which favors the rich and exposes the poor. We want to continue looking at what you say, some of the causes of this state failure. You mentioned militarization of the state and pursuit of a one-party state. Do you feel that the government is pursuing and pushing for a one-party state?
It is evident. In fact, when we started fighting, you remember the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions was closer to ZANU-PF when it was pursuing Butsaru-Zhinji, egalitarian economics and egalitarian legal and political and social welfare. We parted ways with the ZANU-PF when it started pursuing a one-party state. And our argument was that a one-party state will lead to dictatorship. A one-party state will not be efficient because there won't be cross-pollination of ideas, and people will not be allowed to criticize decisions of leaders. So now they have not stopped from that. They were just waiting for a particular time. So the 2017 coup has brought back the agenda of pursuing a one-party state. You see it through many ways, but one of the most important character of those pursuing a one-party state is their clampdown on dissent. So when everyone who is raising a dissenting voice is not safe and free, then you know that the agenda is now on steroids. They are on steroids. You see journalists being arrested, unlawfully arrested and detained, like Hopo Chimono and others, for raising corruption charges or exposing corruption. And that shows you that they don't want anyone exposing them. You see trade unionists being harassed, abducted, detained, and their family living in fear. You also see the opposition. The only opposition that gave real challenge to President Mnangagwa is MDC Alliance. And you see how they are brutalizing it, how they are trying to vanquish it. You know that the one-party state agenda is on course. But not just that. You also look at how the state is capturing independent constitutional institutions. We no longer have any constitutional institution that we can term to be independent. Workers cannot trust the NPA. Workers are now disillusioned by the judiciary. When we are arrested on charges that do not have substance, the judiciary does not grant bail. They take you in and you are detained unlawfully. And that has eroded our trust in the judiciary. You look at it, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commissions, all our constitutional independent institutions have been adulterated and clearly captured. And what then irked us most is when we saw militarization of the labor market. You remember doctors and nurses were on strike for a time. And in one of the president's speeches that was quoted widely in the press, he was quoted to have said that we have resolved the doctors and nurses crisis, the health services crisis, by seconding a soldier. And that is quite revealing, scary, and it is a wake-up call for everyone to denounce militarization of the state. So when The state is militarized. The constitution is suspended. There are no longer constitutional rights as we are witnessing. People cannot freely speak. We don't have the right to freedom of assembly. We can't demonstrate. We can't petition the state. We can't even freely associate, because those independent institutions like political parties, like trade unions, they are being infiltrated. They are being attacked by the state. The state is calling legitimate trade unions terrorist organizations. And this is why we are calling all workers and citizens to denounce, to reject, and to resist a one-party state or militarization of the state. It's not good for anyone. No one is safe. No one is safe.
Right. And you say that this country has become a huge jungle where survival of the fittest is the order of the day, and that many workers and poor citizens now bear the social and economic scars of government's anti-worker policies. Let's talk about what you call the bad and fascist policies in your open letter to the president.
So the best way is to look at the impact first. We have people who worked for this country for many years, 40 years, and we have retired. And they are given a pension of 1,000 RTGS, which is roughly, let's be generous, $10 US. They are supposed to travel and pay $7 US from rural areas, or $5 US, and come back and collect the 10 and use the other 5 back home. They reach home, they have nothing. We have widows, we have orphans who are looking at benefiting from NASA, but they are given less than 500, less than $5 US. We have workers whose pension have been wiped twice in 2008, and despite the Justice Smith Commission that called for a fair conversion of pensions, those workers are going home with nothing. We have people who are sleeping hungry in the ghetto, just buying firewood, just buying a kilogram of LPG gas, cooking gas. Many families can't afford it. People are now having one meal in the ghetto there. So the effects are there to see: dropouts, school dropouts. People are dying at home. This is why these prophets and fake pastors are mushrooming. People are now resorting to unorthodox means because they cannot afford to go to hospital. Just an ambulance, if you are suspecting to have been infected by COVID, you need to fork out 190 US. It takes almost 30 months for a domestic worker to raise that. It takes almost 11 months for a worker in any factory who is earning the minimum wage to pay for ambulance. If you are supposed to be admitted, hospitals want you to fork out from 800 US. That's eternity. You need to work for almost 10 years for you to get 800 US if you are a domestic worker, and not spend it for anything else. So this is the jungle that we are talking about. But look at the opulence. Look at the mansions that are being built in the rich suburbs. Look at the vehicles, the Bugattis that they are bringing, and not paying tax for that matter. MPs are bringing top of the range vehicles and not paying taxes. This is the jungle that we are talking about. So whilst many, the majority are suffering, the very few connected are living in opulence. So it is a matter now of poverty amidst a sea of opulence. And this is what we are challenging. People are suffering out there, but the few connected and elites are living large. I say to many people, take any foreigner, blindfold them at Robert Mugabe International Airport, get them to Borodale, get them to Chisipiti, show them the good, nice things at Semlev, blindfold them again and get them to Epworth, get them to Fio, get them to our suburbs in DZ. They will tell you that you have kidnapped them and brought them to another different country. So it's a matter of two different states within two different countries within one nation.
The rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poor. So what needs to be done? What can be done?
A very big question, and a very big question that I also threw to the citizens in the
Right.
open letter. After reading this letter, after understanding that your suffering is man-made, it's not a natural disaster, what needs to be done? But for the president, we pointed out to him that when he was in exile, we marched in these streets. We didn't march because we so much liked him and his colleagues. We didn't
Right.
march because we'd forgotten about the political elite past atrocities against citizens. We marched because we had hope. We had hope for a new Zimbabwe, a Zimbabwe that was going to be based on constitutionalism, a Zimbabwe that was going to be based on rule of law, accountability, transparency, inclusiveness, openness, and social justice. A
Right.
Zimbabwe that welcomes everyone. And our hope was not without reason, because when the president came, right, his first interview, he said he was going to bring a new dispensation. He said he was going to be different from Mugabe. He said he was going to bring democracy. He was going to bring peace. He was going to bring freedom. He was going to tolerate divergent views. He said he was not going to imprison people for pointing out the wrongs done by politicians and the corruption by politicians. So the template is set. What we need to do, what the president needs to do, is to go back to his statements. If he implements what he promised Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe will be a better place for everyone. But we
Right.
cannot allow as citizens to wait until those who are munching the riches of the country say we are now full. They won't be full. They want to be billionaires. Those who are millionaires want to be billionaires. Those who are billionaires want their kids and their families to be also millionaires. So
Right.
it is up to citizens to exercise our agents. And we've already done so many times. But what we need is to move a step further. Let us push forward for entrenchment of constitutionalism. It is the constitution that demarcates the powers of politicians and state institutions. It is the constitution that guarantees independence of state institutions. It is also the constitution that guarantees our freedom. So the first thing that we need to do as citizens is to say enough is enough. We need to retain our independence. And in that, we need to fight both the repression and dictatorship. But we must not fail to understand that politicians are not repressing us just for fun. They are repressing us because they want to retain the riches of the country. So there is an economic ideology again that we need to fight. We must all fight neoliberalism that is pronounced through Mutuli Nguve's austerity measures. When we were raising these things in the past as labor, people were lambasting us and saying we must just accept that the employers and government cannot pay everyone. But now everyone is wanted. So we need to have a clear ideological ground to fight both repression and neoliberalism. Neoliberalism that is being championed in here is not for good of anyone. It is simply ensuring that the poor continues to tighten their belts until they no longer have the West, while taking what they are working for and transferring it to the rich. And this is why we must fight social injustice. We don't think that we can win against the repression if we don't fight social injustice that is in the form of neoliberalism. So everyone has to fight. We can't wait for Ngari Vume. We can't wait for Wopo alone. What Wopo is doing is to raise awareness. He cannot fight the system on his own. We all need to unite. Let us unite against all forms of division, regionalism, ethnicity, religious beliefs, even political affiliation. You can't use your ZANU-PF card to go and pay school fees or to pay rentals or to buy food in OK or TM. All those people who are supporting any particular political party, we need to unite. And for workers, our power is in our collective. Our power is in the streets. Workers have never gotten anything on a silver platter. You can't expect us to go to court. The courts are not delivering justice. They are delivering injustice. There's no justice there anymore. So we need to wage our struggle and free ourselves from the twin evils, repression and neoliberalism.
Right. Thank you so much, Mofela David Mutuere. He said, please stop addressing him as president. Zimbabweans were very, to support a coup. ED is worse than RG Mugabe. That's your opinion, Mofela. Tinojigamchira. There are others who are also saying the opposite of what you're saying. So all the same, we appreciate the divergent views because this is one Zimbabwe's president is saying we need to build a one unified state. Maybe as we round off, Mr. President, I just want you to touch a little bit on the statutory instruments that were introduced during the COVID-19 lockdowns in 2020 and and also like the one that changed the 1:1 ratio and the one that allowed shops and business people to sell their goods in United States dollars, but no attendant policies to support the worker on the other hand.
Yeah, so as dictatorship entrenches itself, it becomes so much cunning and insidious. It becomes very, very cunning. It stops because it knows that it cannot continue using the barrel and of the gun and bullets, because also it is challenged by the international community and also citizens also challenge it. So it starts to use other instruments of repression, exploitation, and dictatorship. And in this case, the dictatorship is using the legal framework. So SI 33, SI 142, SI 185, they are all meant to transfer wealth from the poor to the rich. Look at it this way. They allowed migration or conversion from US dollar or multi-currency to the local currency. But immediately thereafter, they allowed businesses, their cronies, because now the revolution has been devolved. The former revolutionaries are now the capitalists. They are now in business. They are controlling this either using their proxies and frontmen, but they are now in business. So they realize that they will lose big time if they are to use the local currency. So they allowed themselves, their businesses and their cronies to peg prices of goods and services in US dollars. So they recouped all their losses. In fact, they are making profits without even trading. They go and get US dollars at 1:83 at Reserve Bank and sell it at 1:130, make a cool 40 to 50% without any production. So there cannot be any injustice. And this is not just being transferred from the workers. Tobacco farmers, cotton farmers, grain farmers, they are buying their inputs. In US dollars. But when selling, they are forced to sell in local currency. There cannot be any injustice more than this. This is more than what we got in colonial era, in apartheid era. This is now a deep dictatorship that is quite exploitative, and that is enslaving everyone who is productive and working in this country. And this must be challenged.
Exploitative ways of doing business, and there cannot be any more injustice than this. President Peter Mutasa, thank you so much for coming through to unpack your open letter to President Emmerson Mnangagwa.
It is always my pleasure, and may the citizens of this country know that we only have one life, and we must fight for good life, and not just for ourselves, but also for posterity, for our kids, for our grandchildren, they can't be raised in the environment that we are raised, in the environment that we are living now. They will blame us until they die.
Every generation has a role and a responsibility to play, right? So thank you so much, sir, for coming through, and may God bless you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Zimbabwe, for joining me on Behind the Microphone, a program where we take a look at all the major issues making the headlines, and we bring in the who's to have a conversation so that we can unpack some of these issues, so that we get to understand where the person is coming from and where we are going as a country. Where are we going? What is it that you desire to see for the country, and how are you taking charge? Thank you so much, Marvelous Esther Omera, for appreciating. Anzi, thank you, President. That was profound. Aluta from Marvelous Esther Omera. Right. Thank you so much, Zimbabwe, for coming through. This is Zimbabwe Daily. Do feel free to get in touch with us. If you have an issue that you'd want us to amplify, this is your platform where people take charge of the communication they want to receive. My name is Yvonne, and we'll leave you listening once again to the song that was penned by Hopo Chingono.
Them loot. Oh, them loot Zimbabwe dry. Them loot. Oh, all the people die. Them loot. No medication in hospitals. Them loot. Schools have no books. Them loot. The ghetto youth have no jobs. Them loot. Lord of mercy.